In most cases, you don't need to use Docker. Let me explain. In front of me, and I'll put this up on the screen, is a post from about 4 months ago in the Ansible community on Reddit. And someone was saying that they want to install Ansible onto a Ubuntu 20.04 system that doesn't have direct access to the internet. So it's effectively, potentially, a completely air-gapped environment. Okay, here's what they asked. I need a way to download all required dependencies and set up Ansible offline. It's a really interesting problem, and in fact it's something that I also a few weeks ago was thinking about whether or not I could achieve this too. And effectively one of the top responses we can see here from Session Fox is perfectly viable. Engineering is about taking tools and making them work, and so if it works then it's perfectly viable. But I really hate this Docker first, just put it in a container mentality that we're seeing in the industry. It is lazy. You are being lazy. It is unironically lazy engineering. Here's why. You are not thinking about the system and the systems and the tools properly. Build a container that includes Ansible in an online environment and ship the artifact to the offline one. I get what they're saying there. Then I asked, well, the machine doesn't have access to how will you get Docker over there? And I wanted to test this person to see if they would say you just transfer the debs over, just to see if they thought it through. And they had a really good response. You would basically either mirror the app repositories into the offline environment. Okay, it's a bit extreme. You're talking about terabytes of data there, hundreds of gigabytes at the minimum. Alternatively, transfer the debs or the RPMs over. Yeah, I agree entirely. However, you don't need Docker. Ansible is written in Python. You can just literally create a virtual environment. You can pip download Ansible from it. You'll get all of the wheel files. You just blow away that virtual environment. You take those wheel files, put them in a tarball, send them over to the other machine, and then you create another virtual environment, and then you install Ansible with just pip install, no index. And you set the references locally, and you just point it at the Ansible wheel. It'll see all of the dependencies are there. It'll install it, and you'll have Ansible on the system inside of a virtual environment, which is how it should be done. You should be running anything like this Python-wise inside of a virtual environment. As a side note, pipx is a really nice tool. You just do pipx install Ansible, for example, on a local machine, and it will, I've not tested this offline mechanism with that yet, but it will pull down and create a one-off virtual environment for you. So that's a really nice way of doing it. So you can see that you're just using very primitive tools, using Python, using venv, and nothing else. That's it. That's all you're using. You're not introducing this massive runtime known as Docker or even libcontainer, whatever it's called these days. You're not introducing LXC and all of these runtimes just to run a small Python utility. Well, it's not small, I guess. It's a relatively large utility. You're just using basic operating system primitives to make that possible. So I just don't get this mentality of just put it in a container and ship it. The container is in and of itself almost, for the most part, an entire operating system. You have to make sure that's secure, especially in an air-gapped environment, which I assume this probably is. An air-gapped environment could be anything. It could be a military environment, it could be an intelligence environment, or it could just be the company just wants to air-gap that particular environment, segment it off. Either way, there's a reason for that, and primarily it's security. It's probably due to security. And so introducing things like Docker and containers, which is a whole stack with its own networking stack and volumes that you've got to deal with, and a whole networking stack you've got to deal with, and then inside of the container is indeed an entire operating system. You've then got to secure that. You've got to keep that up to date along with the host operating system around it. So he's running Ubuntu. So if he's got to keep that Ubuntu machine up to date, even though it's offline from the internet, ideally he needs to do that, or they need to do that. And they also need to update the operating system inside the container as well. So it's just an additional layer, whereas you could just not be, quite frankly, stop being lazy and learn how to use the tools properly and do proper engineering. Learn to use the tools that have been around for decades and decades and decades. They work. I just don't get this mentality. Let me know how you feel about this in the comments, and why you would choose Docker over just simple tools that work and have worked for a very long time.